My name's Michael Bertish, and by trade I'm a hairstylist and have my own little shop with my corgi dog that we cut hair here. And I'm also a professional artist and a playwright. Adroit Maneuvers is a lifelong fascination with a story about World War II. And it's based on experience that is firsthand from my own family in a very important time. So I saw a lot of parallels to history in present day and wanted to honor members of my family and the important messages of tolerance and intolerance at the same time, and honor my family in telling those tales. The message that is core to it, there are several, but I wanted to portray how difficult it is for people to be who they are in light of the fact that it is not accepted. So lifestyle, religion, culture, where you're from, all of these things spark controversy because of intolerance. And I don't think that's necessary. And I think it's something that needs to be healed. So that's really the main message of it. And to be careful when you see in your own life the catalysts for intolerance and how quickly that can snowball into something of huge proportion that changes the whole world. I don't want to see that relived again, and I don't think other people do either. So it's important to speak out, and that's the purpose of the play. The play takes place in the 1990s, late 1990s, in a flat, in the kitchen of a flat in Manhattan, and it is the home that is the place where a family escaped to from World War II. And as is common in many families that have suffered atrocities of this nature, that generations that have come after the atrocities were never informed of what happened and why. Pain, shame, guilt, things that you had to do that you don't want anybody to know because you had to survive. All of those things are part of this play, and it sort of like humanizes in everyday terms the decisions that you have to make to survive in horrible times. So the play centers around a visit, and the central character is a grandmother in her late 80s, and she wants very much to commune with her grandson, who's an adult at this point. And there's a lot of time between them, and they love each other, but there are so many secrets. And the grandson came knowing that he was worried that his grandmother is at the end of her life, and he just is very curious and wants to know. And she's very curious about him because he has secrets too. And so by her disclosing certain amazing tales of survival from the war that arise out of the Anschluss in Vienna in the 30s and 40s, and what the family went through to survive. And this grandson finds out that he wouldn't have existed if these things didn't happen. And there are some pretty hair-raising things and ordeals that this family went through, particularly the grandmother. And it's the legacy that he inherits. So in her telling her story, she's able to coax him into telling his. And so it's a meeting of minds out of love and survival and being better people. The character of Hitler is in the play, Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud and Sigmund Freud's wife. These are all historical characters, and they existed and had interplay with characters in real time in this play. So it just shows how the tapestry of history on an everyday level enwraps and enriches common folk, and history loses perspective of that because it's not told. So it's an homage to the private memories of people that get freaked out when they realize how big of an impact on history the smallest person can have. And so it's all based in historical accuracy. So these lives did intersect, and everything happens in a coffee house. With the developments on the national and international stage, with the rise of hate around the world and how that affects governments and countries and people, that there are choices that all of society has to make about what side of the fence that you're on. And from my perspective, it's drawing a line in the sand that says this is acceptable or this is not. And I think that the only way that you can make your decision is to declare your intent. And my play declares my intent in honor of my family. But it leaves one to wonder what happens if, rather than berating and coming from a place of hate and loathing of differences in people, that we come with honor and love instead. And I think that's where the world is heading. Enough of all of this already, and we've already gone down this road. We don't need to reinvent pain and suffering. Let's do a better job, and that's what I hope to achieve. It's rare for the playwright to get to watch a play come alive like this. It's even rarer for the playwright to get to produce and direct it, to ensure the integrity of the vision. And it was really hard, but it happened. And the cast was very receptive to the message. Everybody who worked on it saw the spark of importance in it. And all I can tell you is it's almost never done, but for a director / playwright to see every performance. And I was that vested in making sure that the train was on the track, going in the right direction. Not because it's territorial, just because it was such a miracle that needed to bear witness to, for me personally. And I cannot describe how amazing it was to listen to the reactions of the audience members, have them come. I was just sitting in the back of the theater every night, minding my own business, and to have people seek me out with tears streaming down their faces and talking about how relevant this play is and how it needs to go on and how important the message is, especially in this time. And they were so very touched, and they thanked me for doing it. And so I know the message rings true, and I'm sure it will continue to touch people. From a human perspective, compassion is important, because without that element, life becomes banal and mundane and closed off, and you turn off your heart and your feelings. But if you look with the eyes of compassion, then you start to knit similarities and build relationships rather than build isolation. And I think that's core to overcoming these kinds of obstacles of hate and prejudice and intolerance. So who knew that, you could transpose, the rise of the Third Reich to marriage equality in 2018. Yeah. But it does. The correlation is fantastic.
Yep.
As from the age of a very young boy, I was obsessed with the story. It rattled around in my head for 30 years before I had the courage to actually sit down and write it.
Wow.
And nobody talked about it, and so I had to listen all that time for little snippets.
Yeah.
And I was able to get enough of the story. So I was able to pan out and research the rest and find the evidence that these things occurred. And, from a very young age, what the heck was this Hitler guy about, and what happened here, and why did my family suffer? And I was obsessed to the point where I'd stay up all night thinking about it as a young boy. So I knew I could not do it. So I had to just delve right in. And I remember the day that I found the ship's manifest that showed my grandmother and my infant father on this boat from Japan to Seattle.
Wow.
Exactly the way that my grandmother told me, and there were their names, and this was the date, and this was the ship. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought everybody had to go through Ellis Island. And no, they went in the back door and then took a train to New York City from there, and everybody converged on New York City. And none of that would have happened if people didn't send them rescue money through world relief organizations. So like Albert Einstein, nobody knows this really about him, but he worked with the NAACP. He saw the same thing happening against black people in our country as was happening, in Europe. And so he dedicated his life, and he gave his money that he earned from all of his prizes and his work, and he just doled it out to send people to college and pay their medical bills and buy them houses. And the man just turned it over and paid it forward, and instead of, he wanted to not be remembered as the guy that maybe sort of inspired the atomic bomb. He was trying to make up for that. And how do you wrap your brain around that? And he was really good friends with Sigmund Freud, and then they had a big falling out because they were intellectuals, and intellectual fights happen, but that makes them human beings. And they were the subject of ridicule and hate and bias, and they were personally attacked, and their lives were threatened, and they were nearly offed, each of them. So, what do you do with your life in the face of these kinds of things? And really, the after effect of this play for me, I think, is important to talk about, because it's a labor of love and dedication that it got written, because it is kind of scary material, for me personally anyway. And it's deeply moving, and it kind of boggles the brain and it blows your mind at the same time. But the aftermath of it was that it helped me to understand specifically what I want to fight for in my life, and how to stand up for myself and my dreams and goals, and just to be myself. So it empowered me to do that, and that was huge for me, because I've been taught guilt and shame my entire life. Like, to tell somebody that you come from a Jewish family is like, in some respects, taking your life into your hands. And I've personally experienced being attacked for that, and threatened and abused, and I could never understand why anybody hates for that reason alone. So I stand up for myself as far as that goes. Am I obnoxious about it? No. Things are done subtly. That's how you're successful. But the other thing that I can't help think about is, my family was from a world-class city of culture, art, history, music. And in the blink of an eye, they lost everything to the machinery of war that was spawned from this hatred. So literally overnight, they were once this, and then they became nothing. And then they were just, bodies being manipulated here and there. And by the grace of the universe, several members of my family survived that. But I also have to think of all those in my family who I have records of having been annihilated in concentration camps and whatnot. That's very sobering. So when you see the signs of the times starting to regurgitate the nasty from that period, it really makes you stop and think that, this is my home. At any moment, if this is unleashed, am I yanked away from this? It can happen like that, and that can't be allowed. The third thing that it does is make me feel really grateful that, like what you were saying, if you put your life into perspective, you really have nothing to complain about, because this monumental thing hasn't really happened to you at this level. It could at some point happen to anybody where your life is taken from you, but it hasn't. And so you count your blessings, and you live with that in mind of being better, because at any moment in time, you could be the catalyst or the trigger. If you say the wrong thing that wasn't said in love and compassion to somebody, that could be the one thing that turns their mind into a path of destruction. The power of the word is very powerful, and plays are powerful that way, the power of the word. And it changes your life, it really does.